So, New Life Church, have you ever had something come out of your mouth and your immediate thought was, why did I just say that? Or you spoke some words and on the backside, you just realized like the intent of those words was far from pure. My guess is any of those moments that you've had that happen, you were trying to make yourself look more important, make your words feel more weighty. You were trying to manipulate other people, maybe to listen, maybe to follow what you were saying. But I think we've all had those experiences with our words. And King Saul most definitely did. As we look at this passage in 1 Samuel 14, we're gonna see words, and I don't know at what point in the story Saul realized, oh crud, I've made a huge mistake. Or maybe he was such a foolishly confident king, we see that in his life quite a bit, that he never thought of his words as a mistake. But let's just take a look at it. So look at verse 24. It says this, and the men of Israel had been hard pressed that day. So they're tired, they've worked hard, and this is what Saul decides to do. So Saul had laid an oath on the people, right? He let them have it, saying, cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening and I am avenged on my enemies. Now, the thing you gotta understand is if you've been tracking with us last week, the week ended with Jonathan seeing a miraculous deliverance for the people of Israel. And after that, Saul's on mop-up duty. The people are tired, they're fatigued, and the way he decides to finish the battle is, hey, you can't eat until this is done or you're gonna die. That's bold. Foolish, but bold. And so just so y'all know, like what happens is Jonathan, in the midst of the chapter, he sees some honey. He's unaware that his father has made this rash promise. And so all he does is dips his staff into the honey and eats it. And it says his eyes brightened. Man, like a good leader, Jonathan's like, y'all need to try this. You should eat some of this honey. And every man says, we can't, because your dad said if we do, we're dead. And he was like, well, that was silly. And the battle continues and the battle continues. And then there's this moment at the end of it where night is falling, and Saul's trying to decide whether or not he should continue to pursue the Philistines. And so verse 37, we pick it up here and it says, and Saul inquired of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hands of Israel? But look what God does. But he did not answer him that day. Oh, crud. Now, we also know this is the first time Saul builds an altar and inquires of the Lord, so you got to think maybe he's going like, maybe I did something wrong. So they start asking the Lord what's going on, and eventually, through this process of using the Urim and the Thummim, which we don't have time to get into, God reveals that Jonathan has sinned. Once the problem was discovered to be Jonathan, we pick up in verse 43. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him, I tasted a little honey with the tip of my staff that was in my hand. Now listen, Jonathan understands the vow that Saul has made with God over this situation. And this is Jonathan's response. Jonathan is hardcore. Like, Jonathan loves God, understands how faithfulness works. And so he says this, here I am, I will die. Like, Jonathan's like, listen, I know what's at stake. I know what I did. I know the consequences take my life. And the crazy thing is that everybody starts flipping out. And they're like, we can't. Isn't it through Jonathan's hand that God has delivered us? And there's this interesting part of the verse, and I've never seen it, at the very end of verse 45, right before verse 46, it says this. So the people ransomed Jonathan so that he did not die. Somehow they gave something up so that Jonathan wouldn't have to die. We don't know the details of it. We don't know how much Jonathan's life cost. All we know is that the people rescued Jonathan by giving something up. Now, here's what we see. Rash words, when you speak without thinking, we see that it impacts God. Like, God actually distances himself from Saul because of this rash vow that was broken. Like, until this vow was fulfilled, God distanced himself from Saul. I hope you see that. We also see that Saul's rash words also create disrespect in the eyes of his people, right? All of a sudden, like, they realize that this is a foolish leader. And so today, as we're looking at this scripture, I think the practical implication is simply this. Let's watch our words very carefully. And so here's a couple of questions for you to ponder and consider. How are you using your words to make yourself look more important? Just as you're moving through life, going through the day, how are you gossiping, boasting, exaggerating in order to make yourself look more important? Also, how are you using your words to manipulate others, right? Through shame and guilt, through coercion, through just withholding of love, affection, and acceptance. How are you using your words to do that? Again, to manipulate others, to get them to do what you want to do. Just quickly fast forwarding in the story, going to Jesus. Jesus has this section in the Sermon on the Mount where he's talking about oaths. Like, man, let's be careful about how we're making ourselves look more important, how we're manipulating others. And his concluding remark in this is found in Matthew 5:37, where he simply says this: let what you say be simply yes or no. Like, don't swear by something or make an oath by something. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. And he concludes with this: anything more than this comes from evil, or other versions say come from the evil one. And so, man, let's simplify our words. Let's think before we speak. Let's use our words to build up and edify, not to make ourselves look more important or to manipulate others, because anything beyond that, anything beyond words, simple words to encourage others, comes from the evil one. Have a great day. Watch those words while you're out there.